Republicans are also mad at General Milley because he is quoted, or at least his views are represented, in several of these books about the final days of the Trump administration. And it's clear General Milley was worried about the stability and what potential decisions might be made. Marsha Blackburn, Republican of Tennessee, just decided to put it right out there. He had been asked a couple of the questions earlier about some of the episodes. She just decided straight out, essentially, to find out, how much did you cooperate?
General Milley, yes or no to this? Did you talk to Bob Woodward or Robert Costa for their book, Peril?
Woodward, yes. Costa, no.
Did you talk to Carol Leonic and Philip Rucker for their book, Alone Can I Fix It?
Yes.
Did you talk to Michael Bender for his book is Frankly, We Did Win This Election, The Inside Story of How Trump Lost? Yes.
Yes.
Or no? And were you accurately represented in these books?
I haven't read any of the books.
A little bit of comedy at the end there, but we should all be texting our sources right now, making sure they don't get invited to hearings where they're under oath, I guess, if we're going to ask these questions up there.
And potentially we know who to call if we decide to write a book as well, John. But he did suggest that he talked to almost all of the authors, and while he hasn't read those books, he said he certainly acknowledged he's seen the media coverage, isn't exactly disputing all of what was said, although as you raised some things that he said he did say to Nancy Pelosi or didn't. But the point being that there was a primary source. He's just admitted it was him.
He did dispute, though, that he was accurately described. I'm sorry.
Right.
In the very top in his prepared, he devoted a very sizable chunk of his prepared remarks, of his opening statement, to saying, no, at no point was I trying to hem in the President of the United States. At no point was I making secret calls to the China. I mean, he and that's all. Obviously, we can say that's a bank shot.
I didn't mean to say to Pelosi that I believe that.
Yeah, he says he said he didn't read the books. He clearly closely read the media accounts and the media conversations about the books. To your point, what he said was, I am not qualified to determine the mental health of the President of the United States.
But it goes back to the threat about civilian control of the military, too, because what was so amazing about some of these books was that they were clearly suggesting that he was stepping outside the bounds of that constitutional divide. And he took pains, and the others took pains throughout this entire hearing to say, no, we believe in civilian control of the military.
So I think it was obvious that he had spoken to some of these authors. If you read the books, it's a two-way conversation that he had with someone. So it was pretty clear that he had participated. So I do think it's notable that he said that. But I think the larger point is that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff felt the need to sit down with these highly respected authors, talk to them about his experiences in this role, being handpicked by Trump, someone who, of course, has now turned on him and views him quite differently. But I do think it speaks to the level of gravity that in this situation, regardless of what you think of Milley, of what that they felt like they were facing when Trump was president.
You're exactly right. But if there was a kind of a camera on us while we were watching that, it was a moment to watch the chairman of the Joint Chiefs be asked whether you talked to all of these authors, boom, boom, boom. Yes, one-word answer, affirming it. It was definitely a moment. It was affirming what was pretty obvious, but to hear him say it, I guess he didn't have a choice. He was asked under oath.
And it's also just so rare. Look, you don't have, I hope, you don't have 20-year wars where this comes up. But just to see America's top general as essentially the star witness, even though the defense secretary was here, even though some of the other combatant commanders were there, for Milley to be there. And then to the point, a moment ago we talked about it. So let's just listen. This is what, in the book, in the Peril book, Nancy Pelosi says she was having this conversation. Is the president going to launch a military attack? You know he's crazy. That's what Nancy Pelosi said to General Milley. Nancy Pelosi says he agreed with her. He says,
She was concerned and made various personal references characterizing the president. I explained to her that the president is the sole nuclear launch authority and he doesn't launch them alone, and that I am not qualified to determine the mental health of the president of the United States.
You were on the program and making this point when the book first came out, that some of that sounds like, whoa, what was Milley doing? But the way he describes it anyway is that, no, actually, we have procedures, and he was, as a veteran of the system, using the system to his advantage.
Right. He's part of the chain of communication, not the chain of command, which I think is exactly how he phrased it in his statements today. And the point that he describes making to Nancy Pelosi is that there was not going to be an illegal or accidental launch, which is pretty important. One other thing that Milley said that I thought was interesting, and Senator Joe Manchin pointed to it as well, and I think it's really important. This war wasn't lost in the last month. It wasn't lost in the last year. Joe Manchin coming out and saying, like, how is it possible that you guys were caught by surprise? Every time we've had an analysis of this conflict, people have come back and said they can't stand on their own. They can't fight without American support. The government has a crisis of legitimacy. There's rampant corruption, which, by the way, the U.S. fueled. That was a good moment too, and I think it was Milley who said, yeah, well, right, this was lost over the course of the last 2 decades.
Also, him saying that they don't necessarily agree with what the State Department has said about how many Americans are left there, saying that they don't really have a good accounting of that. Manchin was raising the question, how much equipment is there? I think those are big questions that are not going away as these hearings
And it's a great point, because you heard frustration even from Democrats.
Yeah.
Because the Pentagon keeps saying ask the State Department. The State Department keeps saying ask the Pentagon. And Senator Tim Kaine, who was Hillary Clinton's running mate, a very prominent Democrat, was saying, get your act together, guys. Get your act together. We deserve these answers.
And not for nothing, they didn't know the answer to where the democratically elected president of Afghanistan was. They don't know where he is right now, nor do they know how much U.S. American dollars he has with him. That's incredible.
Right.
And going back to Tim Kaine, your point, it wasn't just Republicans today, it was Democrats. And one point that Tim Kaine had raised was, if you can't get people to take the vaccine in America, if you can't get people to believe that the election was not stolen, why did you think that you were going to be able to get the Afghans to be able to fight for themselves? And so, I thought that was another
And to accept democratic norms, to accept that women should be educated, that accept a public health care system. It's a great point. How do you change a nation when you see you have a hard time persuading your own sometimes? So the White House watches moments like this, because even the Democrats were mad about how it happened. Even Democrats who support it's time to end the war in Afghanistan, it was time to leave, have questions about the messy withdrawal, which is why if you're at the White House today, you're sending a thank you note to Elizabeth Warren, who went out of her way to come to the president's defense.
Did President Biden follow your advice on executing on the evacuation plan?
He did.
Did President Biden give you all the resources that you needed?
From my view, he did.
Did President Biden ignore your advice on the evacuation at any point?
No, Senator, he did not.
Did he refuse any request for anything that you needed or asked for?
No.
It's an incredibly complicated issue, and there will be a lot of questions to the administration. What you saw there, though, is a fellow Democrat who understands this is part of the toll on the president's poll numbers, the rising COVID cases, the messy withdrawal from Afghanistan. That's a Democrat trying to come to the president's assist.
Never mind that it was, for context, after the barn door closed. I mean, when the president and everybody saw what was going on there, of course he's going to say yes to everything and anything the military wants to try to calm the chaos and evacuate people. The questions, the larger questions and answers we got today were, what about before the decision to withdraw, and why not heed the military recommendation to leave some troops there?
And I think it raises one other big question, which is the president has said repeatedly he felt bound by this agreement that Trump struck with the Taliban, and that's why he had to follow through on this timeline. And that is something that he has said repeatedly. They were saying today the Taliban only honored one part of that, so essentially it was defunct and they weren't actually following what we thought it should look like. But that's been something that
General Milley was very emphatic on that. When you make these deals, base them on conditions, not on firm deadlines. That was a very important lesson as well.